The Second Battle of Tikrit was a battle in which the Iraqi forces recaptured the city of Tikrit from the Islamic State of Iraq in the Levant. Iraqi forces consisted of the government's security forces and the Popular Mobilization Forces, receiving assistance from Iran's Quds Force officers on the ground, and American, British, and French air forces. The city of Tikrit, located in the central part of the Saladin Governorate in north of Baghdad and Samarra and lying adjacent to the Tigris River, was lost to ISIL during the huge strides made by the group during its offensive in June 2014. After its capture, ISIL performed its most infamous massacre at Camp Speicher, located near Tikrit. After months of preparation and intelligence gathering, Iraqi forces engaged in offensive operations to fully encircle and subsequently retake the city, starting on the 2nd of March 2015. It was reported that 90% of the residents of the city left out of fear both of ISIL and retaliatory attacks by Shia militias once the city is captured. As such, most of the residents fled to nearby cities, such as Baghdad and Samarra, or even further to Iraqi Kurdistan or Lebanon. On the 4th of April, after several days of heavy fighting and acts of vengeance committed by some Shiite militias, the situation in the city was reported to have been stabilized, and the last pockets of ISIL resistance were eliminated, with an Iraqi police major reporting that the situation now is calm. However, on the 5th of April, continued resistance by 500 ISIL fighters in the city was reported in several pockets. On the 12th of April 2015, Iraqi forces declared that Tikrit was finally free of all ISIL forces, stating that it was safe for residents to return. However, pockets of resistance persisted until the 17th of April, when the last 140 ISIL sleeper agents in the city were killed. Cleanup and defusing operations in the city continued, but Iraqi officials predicted that it would take at least several months to remove the estimated 5,000–10,000 IEDs left behind by ISIL in Tikrit. Background: Tikrit, the hometown of former Sunni dictator Saddam Hussein, fell to ISIL during the offensive in June 2014. A first attempt to recapture the city in late June 2014 was repelled by ISIL after a few days, as well as another Iraqi attempt to recapture the city in July 2014. Subsequent efforts in December 2014 also failed to make headway against ISIL, which consolidated control over Tikrit and its environs. On the morning of 19 August 2014, Iraqi government troops and allied militiamen launched a major operation to retake the city of Tikrit from the militants. The military push started early in the morning from the south and southwest of the city. However, by the afternoon, the offensive had been repelled by the insurgents. Additionally, the military lost its positions in the southern area of the city it had captured a few weeks earlier. The operation in Tikrit counted as the first major attempt by both Iraqi military and the Iran-backed Shiite to recapture ground seized by Islamic State group the previous summer. On this occasion, according to Pentagon's top officer, there is no doubt that the success in recapturing the seized ground tied with Iran's involvement. Preparations. The Allied forces were composed of a heterogeneous makeup, including Iraqi security forces, a multitude of Shiite militias, and even a number of Sunni tribes, whom have joined the Allies against ISIL in the Second Battle of Tikrit. It is also noteworthy that there are numerous officers from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Extraterritorial Operations Division, the Quds Force. These include the commander of the Quds Force, General Qasem Soleimani himself. The Iraqi army and security forces, along with Shia militia groups who call themselves Popular Mobilization Units, were to push into Tikrit from several directions. Some Iranian commanders took part in leading the operation, with General Qasem Soleimani directing operations on the eastern flank from a village about 35 miles from Tikrit called Abu Rayash. The offensive was the biggest military operation in the Salahuddin region since the previous summer, when ISIL fighters killed hundreds of Iraq army soldiers who had abandoned their military base at Camp Speicher outside Tikrit. Soleimani was also spotted at Camp Speicher, where he oversaw elements of the Khatib Imam Ali and the Badr brigades, the Shiite paramilitary groups constituted by far the largest component of the Allied forces at 20,000 fighters, with 3,000 being the total count of the Iraqi security forces and roughly 1,000 or so Sunni tribesmen making up the rest of the combined army. An advisor to the Iraqi government was quoted as saying that the attackers were divided into an initial assault force of 9,000, with another group made up of local Sunni tribesmen who were to pacify the city, and another group which would work on intelligence gathering, reconstruction work, and dealing with the expected refugee flow caused by the fighting. According to reports from locals, most of the civilian residents had left Tikrit for Kurdistan and Baghdad, leaving mostly ISIL fighters inside the city. The UN estimated that about 28,000 civilians had reached Samarra following the outbreak of the offensive against ISIL. The US-led coalition initially was not a participant in the operation. As the battle commenced, Gen. Martin Dempsey mentioned that, while the US-led coalition had not been directly involved in the offensive, the continuous airstrikes along the length and breadth of ISIL territories in Syria and Iraq have depleted the group's capacity significantly, and that the newest assault against Tikrit would not have been militarily feasible if it were not for the airstrike campaign in the preceding months throughout the country. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs also maintained that Iran's overt role could be positive and could only become problematic if it descended into sectarianism.